The day Olivia Sullivan first heard the hoofbeats of Benjamin Drake's horse thundering into the dusty streets of Bonanza, Colorado. She knew something extraordinary had arrived even though she had never seen a horse, or a man, or even the dirt that clouded up around them in the spring of 1878. Standing on the porch of her father's general store, her unseeing eyes turned toward the commotion as the rest of the town fell silent at the newcomer's approach. Olivia had been blind since birth, but that had never stopped her from experiencing the world in her own way. At 22, she had learned to navigate through sound, smell, touch, and an uncanny intuition that her father claimed was sharper than most folks' eyesight. Her delicate fingers skimmed across the wooden railing as she listened to the approaching rider slow his horse to a walk. "Who is it, Pa?" she asked, turning her head slightly toward where she knew her father stood. Samuel Sullivan was a burly man with a heart as vast as the Colorado mountains that surrounded their small mining town. "Stranger," Samuel replied, his voice tight with the wariness that all strangers received in Bonanza. The town had seen its share of trouble since the silver boom began. "Looks like trouble, if you ask me." Benjamin Drake dismounted his chestnut stallion with the fluid grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. Dust clung to his worn leather vest and faded blue shirt, and a week's worth of beard shadowed his jaw. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, scanned the town methodically, taking note of every face, every doorway, every possible threat. 6 years as a bounty hunter had taught him to be vigilant, but something else had brought him to Bonanza, something he wasn't ready to share with anyone just yet. "Water for my horse," Ben asked, his voice low but carrying across the suddenly quiet street. Several people had stopped to stare, including a group of miners fresh from their shift and the town's sheriff, who stood outside his office with a suspicious glare. "Water troughs over there," Samuel pointed, not moving from his protective position near his daughter. "You passing through or staying?" Ben led his horse toward the trough. "Might stay a spell, looking for work." Olivia tilted her head, listening intently to the stranger's voice. There was something in it, a weariness, yes, but also a gentleness that didn't match her father's assessment of trouble. "What kind of work you looking for, mister?" Sheriff Wilson called out, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Whatever's available," Ben replied evenly, keeping his eyes on his horse as it drank. "I can ride, shoot, and read, been a ranch hand, done some bounty hunting." He paused. "But I'm done with that line of work now." The sheriff exchanged glances with Samuel. "Bonanza's a peaceful town these days. We like to keep it that way." "So do I," Ben said simply. Olivia stepped forward, her hand finding the worn wooden post at the edge of the porch with practiced ease. "Pa, we need help with the deliveries since Mr. Johnson broke his leg. Maybe the stranger could help us for a while." Samuel looked at his daughter in surprise. Olivia rarely offered suggestions about the business, especially regarding strangers. But there was something in her expression, a certainty that gave him pause. "Olivia," he began cautiously. "Please, Pa," she said quietly. "At least consider it." Ben watched the exchange with interest, his eyes drawn to the young woman on the porch. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and she wore a modest blue dress, but it was her eyes that caught his attention, pale blue, beautiful but unfocused, staring somewhere past him. He realized with a start that she was blind. "Your daughter makes a good point, Mr. Sullivan," Ben said, stepping closer to the porch. "I'm handy with a wagon, good with inventory, and I don't cause trouble unless trouble finds me first." Samuel frowned, but he had to admit they did need the help. "Store closes at 6. Come back tomorrow morning at 7 if you're serious. We'll see how it goes for a day or two." "Much obliged," Ben replied with a slight nod. "Name's Benjamin Drake, by the way." "Samuel Sullivan," the storekeeper replied stiffly. "This is my daughter, Olivia." Olivia smiled in Ben's general direction. "Welcome to Bonanza, Mr. Drake." There was something in her smile that made Ben feel as though she could see right through him, past the layers of dust and weariness to something he thought he'd buried long ago. It was unsettling, but not entirely unwelcome. "Thank you, Miss Sullivan," he replied, his voice softening slightly. As Ben led his horse away to find lodging at the town's small hotel, Olivia listened to his retreating footsteps, her head tilted thoughtfully. Why'd you do that, Livy? Her father asked once the stranger was out of earshot. You've never taken to strangers before. Olivia shook her head slightly. I don't know, Pa, there's just something about him. He sounds lost, but not bad at all. Samuel sighed, knowing his daughter's intuition was rarely wrong. Well, we'll see what tomorrow brings. Come on inside now, it's getting chilly. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across Bonanza, neither Olivia nor Ben could have guessed how their lives would intertwine in the days to come, or how the secrets Ben carried with him would eventually threaten everything they held dear. Morning came to Bonanza with the soft golden light that made the surrounding mountains seem to glow. Olivia was already awake, her fingers deftly buttoning her simple brown work dress as she listened to the sounds of the town coming to life. The familiar creaks of the floorboards told her that her father was already downstairs in the store, preparing for the day. Olivia had memorized every inch of their home above the general store. 3 steps from her bed to the dresser, 14 to the door, 10 down the narrow hallway, and 12 down the stairs to the store below. She navigated it all with a grace born of years of practice, her hand trailing lightly along the wall more out of habit than necessity. Morning, Pa, she called as she reached the bottom of the stairs. The scent of coffee and fresh baked bread filled the air, mingling with the unique aroma of the general store, a combination of leather, sugar, fabric, and tobacco that had been as constant in her life as her father's voice. Morning, Livy, Samuel replied, his voice coming from near the counter. Sleep well. Yes, she lied. In truth, she had lain awake longer than usual, her thoughts returning again and again to the stranger with the gentle voice and weary footsteps. There was something about Benjamin Drake that intrigued her, something she couldn't quite name. The bell above the store door jingled precisely at 7 o'clock, and Olivia turned toward the sound, a curious smile playing at her lips. She could tell it was Ben from the steady, measured cadence of his boots on the wooden floor, already distinguishable to her keen ears from the dozen other men who regularly entered the store. Morning, Mr. Sullivan, Ben said, his voice clearer than yesterday, freshly shaved and rested. Miss Sullivan, Mr. Drake, Olivia acknowledged with a slight nod in his direction. Samuel put down the ledger he'd been reviewing. Right on time, I appreciate punctuality. Yes, sir, Ben replied. For the next hour, Samuel showed Ben around the store, explaining the inventory system, delivery schedules, and his expectations. Olivia listened as she went about her morning routine, setting out fresh penny candy in glass jars, arranging items on the front counter, and checking the mail that had arrived on yesterday's stage. Miss Sullivan seems to know her way around quite well, Ben observed during a brief lull, his voice low as he helped Samuel stack crates of canned goods. Olivia knows this store better than most folks with sight know their own homes, Samuel replied proudly. Been helping me since she was tall enough to reach the counter. Her mother died when she was just 5, so it's been just the 2 of us for a long while. Ben nodded, watching as Olivia confidently moved behind the counter, her fingers tracing the edges of the mail sorter. That couldn't have been easy for either of you. Life rarely hands us what's easy, Mr. Drake, Samuel said, giving Ben a measuring look. I suspect you know that as well as anyone. Before Ben could respond, the store door opened again, and a well-dressed man with a pinched expression entered. Olivia's posture stiffened immediately, and Ben noticed her knuckles whitening as she gripped the edge of the counter. Good morning, Sullivan, the man said, barely glancing at Olivia. I trust you've reconsidered my offer. Morning, Mr. Hargrove, Samuel replied, his voice noticeably cooler. And no, I haven't changed my mind. The store isn't for sale. Theodore Hargrove, owner of the largest silver mine in the county and half the buildings in Bonanza, removed his expensive hat and sighed dramatically. You're making a mistake, Sullivan. The town's growing. This location would make an excellent bank, and I'm offering you far more than this. Establishment is worth. My father said no, Mr. Hargrove, Olivia interjected, her voice quiet but firm, as he has the last 3 times you've asked. Hargrove's eyes narrowed as he finally acknowledged Olivia's presence. I wasn't addressing you, Miss Sullivan. Women, especially those with your Limitations should leave business matters to men who can properly see the situation. Ben straightened, a flash of anger crossing his features before he schooled his expression back to neutrality. He recognized Hargrove's type all too well, men who believed their wealth gave them the right to bully and belittle others. Samuel's face reddened. That's enough, Hargrove. I've given you my answer. Now, unless you're here to buy something, I'll thank you to leave my store. Hargrove replaced his hat with deliberate slowness, his gaze shifting to Ben. New help, Sullivan? You must be desperate indeed. His eyes narrowed. You look familiar, stranger. Have we met? I doubt it, Ben replied evenly. I'd remember. Something in his tone made Hargrove hesitate. After a moment, the mine owner turned and left, the bell jangling harshly in his wake. Pleasant fellow, Ben remarked dryly once the door had closed. Samuel sighed, the tension gradually leaving his shoulders. Theodore Hargrove owns most of Bonanza, or thinks he should, been trying to buy us out for nearly a year now. He's not used to being refused, Olivia added, her composure returning, especially by someone like me, someone like you. Ben asked. A blind woman, she replied matter-of-factly. Mr. Hargrove believes my blindness extends to my mind as well as my eyes. Ben studied her for a moment. Some men are blind in ways that have nothing to do with their eyes, Miss Sullivan. A small smile touched Olivia's lips. That's very true, Mr. Drake. She tilted her head as if considering him anew. Very true indeed. The rest of the morning passed in a busy blur of customers, deliveries, and inventory. Ben proved himself capable and efficient, much to Samuel's cautious approval. By midday, when the lunch-hour lull settled over the store, Samuel felt comfortable enough to leave Ben and Olivia in charge while he attended the weekly town council meeting. I shouldn't be more than an hour, he told them, pausing at the door. You'll be all right, Livy. Of course, Pa, she assured him. Mr. Drake and I will manage just fine. After her father left, an awkward silence fell between them. Ben busied himself organizing a shelf of tools, while Olivia sat at the counter, her fingers moving methodically over a piece of paper filled with raised dots, a system of reading she had learned from a traveling teacher years ago. What are you reading? Ben finally asked, curiosity overcoming his usual reticence. Olivia smiled, pleasantly surprised by his interest. It's called Braille. Each pattern of dots represents a letter. This is a book of poetry by Mr. Longfellow. May I? Ben asked, moving closer. Of course. Ben examined the page with genuine interest. I've never seen anything like this. It must have taken tremendous patience to learn. No more than learning to read with your eyes, I imagine, Olivia replied. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind since the previous day. Mr. Drake, may I ask what brings you to Bonanza? It's not exactly on the way to anywhere. Ben was quiet for a long moment, and Olivia feared she had overstepped. But when he spoke, his voice carried no offense, just a careful consideration of his words. I'm looking for something, he said finally. Or maybe trying to leave something behind. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Olivia nodded, understanding more than he might have expected. That's true for most of us, I think. We're all searching for something, even if we don't know what it is. Ben studied her face, struck by the wisdom in her words. You're not what I expected, Miss Sullivan. Oh, and what did you expect from a blind storekeeper's daughter in a small mining town? There was no bitterness in her tone, only genuine curiosity. Ben smiled, though she couldn't see it. I'm not entirely sure, but certainly not someone who reads Longfellow and sees through people quite so clearly. Olivia laughed softly. People often forget that seeing comes in many forms, Mr. Drake. Sometimes the eyes are the least reliable way to truly know someone. The bell above the door interrupted their conversation as a customer entered, but something had shifted between them, a connection, tentative but real, that would continue to grow in the days that followed. The week passed quickly, each day establishing a comfortable rhythm. Ben proved himself invaluable around the store, fixing the leaky roof, reorganizing the storeroom for greater efficiency, and handling the more difficult customers with a quiet authority that even Samuel came to respect. He rented a small room above the livery stable and took his meals at the boarding house run by widow Martha Jenkins, but spent most of his waking hours at Sullivan's general store. On Friday afternoon, as dark clouds gathered over the mountains promising a spring thunderstorm, Ben was loading the store's wagon with supplies for a delivery to the Anderson Ranch, 5 miles outside of town, when Sheriff Wilson approached. "Afternoon, Drake," the sheriff said, eyeing the loaded wagon. "Getting along well at Sullivan's, I see." Ben nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir. Mr. Sullivan's been kind enough to give me steady work." The sheriff leaned against the wagon, his posture casual but his eyes watchful. "Got a telegram from Denver this morning. Seems they're still looking for the man who killed Judge Patterson back in '76. Nasty business that. Shot right in his own courtroom during a trial." Ben kept his expression neutral as he secured a crate of flour. "I remember hearing about that." "Never caught who did it, no," Wilson said, watching Ben carefully. "But there was a bounty hunter working the case, fellow named Drake. Any relation?" Ben met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "It's a common enough name." "That it is," Wilson agreed. "Still, makes a man curious why a bounty hunter would suddenly quit the profession and take up store work in a small town like Bonanza." "Maybe he got tired of chasing other people's ghosts," Ben replied quietly. Before the sheriff could respond, Olivia emerged from the store, a package wrapped in brown paper in her hands. "Mr. Drake, Pa said to add Mrs. Anderson's medicine to the delivery." "Of course, Miss Sullivan," Ben said, moving to help her. Their fingers brushed as he took the package, and despite the sheriff's presence, Ben couldn't help but notice the slight flush that colored her cheeks. Sheriff Wilson observed the interaction with interest. "Afternoon, Miss Sullivan, your father around?" "He's inside, Sheriff," Olivia replied politely. "Can I help you with something?" "No, just passing the time with Mr. Drake here," Wilson said. "You be careful on that delivery, Drake. Storm's coming in fast." "I'll be back before it hits," Ben assured him, though his eyes remained wary as the sheriff tipped his hat and continued down the street. Once Wilson was out of earshot, Olivia moved closer to Ben, her voice low. "Is everything all right? You seem tense." Ben hesitated, surprised once again by her perceptiveness. The sheriff's just doing his job, being cautious about newcomers. "That's not all though, is it?" Olivia pressed gently. "Your voice changes when you're not telling the whole truth. It gets tighter here." She raised her hand, her fingers hovering just inches from his throat. For a moment, Ben was tempted to tell her everything about Judge Patterson, about the bounty that had gone wrong, about why he had really come to Bonanza. But the timing wasn't right, and he wasn't ready to see the trust in her face turn to fear or disappointment. "I should get this delivery to the Andersons before the rain starts," he said instead, his voice softening. Would you like to come along?" "It might be nice to get out of the store for a while." Olivia's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. "Really? Pa usually doesn't let me go on deliveries. He worries." "I'll keep you safe," Ben promised, the words carrying more weight than he had intended. "And it's only 5 miles. We'd be back well before dark." "Let me ask Pa," she said, practically skipping back to the store. Samuel was predictably reluctant, but Olivia's enthusiasm and Ben's assurances of a quick, safe trip eventually won him over. Minutes later, Ben was helping Olivia up onto the wagon seat, acutely aware of the delicate strength of her hand in his as she found her balance. As they set off, the first rumbles of thunder echoed in the distance, but neither Ben nor Olivia paid much attention to the approaching storm. For the first time since Ben had arrived in Bonanza, they had a chance to talk without Samuel's watchful presence or the interruptions of customers. "Tell me what it looks like," Olivia requested as they left the town behind. "The countryside, I mean. I've lived here all my life, but I only know what people describe to me." Ben looked around at the rolling foothills leading up to the majestic Rocky Mountains, trying to see it through new eyes for her sake. "The road follows a creek that's running high with snowmelt. The water's clear and fast, tumbling over rocks and making white foam in places. There are pine trees along the banks, tall and straight, with new growth on their tips that's a brighter green than the rest." He continued his descriptions as they traveled, painting pictures with words of wildflowers beginning to bloom in meadows, a hawk circling overhead, and the dramatic clouds building to the west, dark and heavy with rain. Olivia listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed how carefully she was imagining everything he described. "You're very good at this," she told him when he paused. "Most people just say something is pretty or nice and think that's enough." "I've spent a lot of time observing details," Ben admitted. "In my previous line of work, missing something small could be dangerous." "Bounty hunting," Olivia said softly. It wasn't a question. Ben's hands tightened on the reins. "How did you I hear things," she explained. "People talk in the store, often forgetting I'm there or assuming that because I can't see, I don't listen. The sheriff's been asking questions about you." Ben was silent for a long moment, weighing how much to tell her. "Yes, I was a bounty hunter. For 6 years. I'm not proud of everything I did during that time." "Why did you stop?" she asked, her face turned toward him, expression open and curious rather than judgmental. The wagon hit a rut in the road, jostling them both and giving Ben a moment to organize his thoughts. "There was a job that went wrong." "Very wrong. A man died who shouldn't have, and afterward I couldn't stomach the work anymore." Olivia nodded slowly. "So you came to Bonanza to start over?" "Something like that," Ben agreed, though there was more to the story, much more that he wasn't ready to share. They reached the Anderson ranch just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Ben helped Olivia down from the wagon and led her to the covered porch while he quickly unloaded their deliveries. Mrs. Anderson, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, insisted they stay for coffee until the worst of the storm passed. The Andersons' cozy kitchen was warm and welcoming, filled with the scents of fresh baking and strong coffee. Mrs. Anderson chatted happily with Olivia while her husband helped Ben stable the horses temporarily in their barn. "It's good to see Samuel letting you out a bit, dear," Mrs. Anderson told Olivia as she poured coffee into sturdy mugs. "He's been so protective since your mother passed." "He means well," Olivia replied, accepting the mug with a grateful smile. "And I understand his concerns." "Of course, but a young woman needs some freedom," Mrs. Anderson insisted, "and some company besides her father and the old busybodies who frequent the store." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Your Mr. Drake seems very capable, and handsome too from what these old eyes can see." Olivia blushed. "He's not my Mr. Drake, Mrs. Anderson. He works for my father." "For now," the older woman said with a knowing smile in her voice. "But I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Like you're something precious he's afraid to touch." Before Olivia could respond, the kitchen door opened as Ben and Mr. Anderson returned, bringing with them the fresh scent of rain and the rumble of thunder directly overhead. "Storms set in for a good hour at least," Mr. Anderson announced, hanging his wet coat by the door. "You two might as well make yourselves comfortable." As predicted, the storm raged for over an hour, trapping them at the Anderson ranch but providing an unexpectedly pleasant interlude. Mr. Anderson regaled them with stories of the early days of Bonanza, when the silver strike had first brought prospectors flooding to the area. His tales of claim jumpers, shoot-outs, and the gradual taming of the wild mining camp into a proper town captivated both Ben and Olivia. By the time the storm passed, leaving behind a freshly washed landscape and a spectacular rainbow that Ben described in detail for Olivia's benefit, it was late afternoon. They thanked the Andersons for their hospitality and set off back to town, the wagon wheels splashing through puddles on the muddy road. "I've known the Andersons my whole life," Olivia said as they traveled, "but I've never visited their ranch before. Thank you for bringing me." "You should get out more," Ben replied, his voice warm. "There's a whole world beyond the store." "Pa worries," she said simply. "After Ma died, I became his whole world. He's afraid something will happen to me." "What do you want?" Ben asked. The question caught Olivia by surprise. People rarely asked about her wants or dreams, assuming her blindness limited both. I want to experience more, to feel the sun on my face somewhere other than our porch, to meet people who don't look at me with pity, to be seen as Olivia first and blind second, if at all." Ben nodded, forgetting momentarily that she couldn't see the gesture. "You deserve that." The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in Olivia's chest. They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thought, until Ben suddenly pulled the wagon to a halt. "What is it?" Olivia asked, instantly alert. The creeks overflowed the road ahead, Ben explained, standing up slightly to get a better view. The storm must have caused a flash flood upstream. We can't cross here. Is there another way back to town? Ben considered their options. There's a longer route that goes around through Miller's Pass, but it would add at least 2 hours to our journey. We wouldn't make it back before dark. Olivia bit her lip, knowing her father would be frantic if they weren't back soon. What about the old logging trail? It runs parallel to this road but higher up the hillside. It should connect back to the main road about a mile from town. You know about the logging trail? Ben asked, surprised. Olivia smiled. I told you I listen. The loggers come into the store and talk about their routes. The old trail isn't used much anymore, but they say it's still passable. Ben spotted the narrow trail heading up into the trees about 50 yards back. It looks steep and rough. Are you sure you're comfortable trying it? I trust you, Olivia said simply, her hand finding his arm with unerring accuracy. And I'd rather face a rough trail than my father's worry if we're late. The decision made, Ben carefully turned the wagon around and found the entrance to the old logging trail. It was indeed steep and rough, forcing him to concentrate fully on guiding the horses safely up the narrow path. Olivia held tightly to the seat, her face alive with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They had almost reached the highest point of the trail when disaster struck. One of the wagon wheels hit a hidden stump, cracking with a sound like a gunshot. The wagon lurched violently, and despite Ben's best efforts to control the team, the damaged wheel gave way completely, sending the wagon tilting precariously to one side. Hold on. Ben shouted, grabbing Olivia around the waist as the wagon began to topple. In one fluid motion, he pulled her from the seat and jumped, twisting in midair so that he would take the brunt of the impact. They hit the ground hard and rolled, Ben keeping his arms protectively around Olivia until they came to a stop several feet away from the now overturned wagon. Are you hurt? Ben asked urgently, his hands gently searching for injuries as he helped her sit up. Olivia was breathless but remarkably calm. I don't think so, just some bruises. I'm fine, Ben assured her, though his shoulder throbbed where it had struck the ground. The horses seem all right too, thankfully. Ben helped Olivia to a fallen log where she could sit comfortably, then went to assess the damage to the wagon. The news wasn't good. The wheel was completely shattered, and one of the axles had cracked in the fall. We won't be driving this back to town, he reported grimly, returning to her side. But we have options. I could help you onto one of the horses and ride double back to town, or I could ride ahead for help and come back for you. How far are we from town now? Olivia asked practically. About 3 miles, I'd guess. But I don't like the idea of you riding double if you're not used to horses, and I like the idea of leaving you alone even less. Olivia stood carefully, brushing dirt from her skirt. I can walk. 3 miles isn't so far, and the rain has cooled things down. We should unhitch the horses, though, so they can follow more easily. Ben stared at her in amazement. Most women he knew would be hysterical after such an accident, especially one who couldn't see. But Olivia was calm, practical, and apparently ready to hike 3 miles through rough country. You continue to surprise me, Miss Sullivan, he said with genuine admiration. Olivia smiled. Good, I'd hate to be predictable. After unhitching the horses and gathering what supplies they could salvage from the wagon, they set off down the trail. Ben offered Olivia his arm, which she accepted gratefully. The going was slow but steady, with Ben carefully describing any obstacles in their path. As they walked, the conversation flowed easily between them. Ben found himself telling Olivia stories of his travels that he had never shared with anyone else: the magnificent sunsets over the New Mexico desert, the towering redwoods of California, the endless grasslands of the plains. Olivia, in turn, shared memories of growing up in Bonanza, including her mother's death from influenza and her father's subsequent overprotectiveness. He blames himself, she explained as they navigated a particularly rocky section of trail. He was away on a buying trip when she fell ill. By the time he returned, it was too late. That's a heavy burden to carry, Ben said softly, thinking of his own regrets. Yes, Olivia agreed. I think that's why he's so afraid of losing me too. He couldn't bear it." They walked in thoughtful silence for a while, the only sounds their footsteps, the horses following behind, and the occasional bird call. The sun was beginning to set when they finally reached the main road, casting long shadows across their path. "We should make it back before full dark," Ben said, relief evident in his voice. "Your father will be worried, but at least we're safe." No sooner had the words left his mouth than they heard the sound of approaching horses. Ben tensed, instinctively moving Olivia behind him until he recognized Samuel Sullivan's wagon racing toward them, the storekeeper driving the team at a dangerous pace. "Livy," Samuel called out as soon as he spotted them, pulling his horses to an abrupt halt. "Thank God." He jumped down from the wagon and rushed to his daughter, enveloping her in a fierce hug before holding her at arm's length to examine her for injuries. "Are you hurt? What happened?" "I'm fine, Pa," Olivia assured him, returning his embrace. "The creek flooded the road, so we took the logging trail. The wagon wheel broke, that's all." Samuel's relief quickly turned to anger as he rounded on Ben. "I trusted you with my daughter. You promised to keep her safe." "He did keep me safe, Pa," Olivia interjected firmly, stepping between them. "The accident wasn't his fault, and when the wagon overturned, he protected me. Without Mr. Drake, I might have been seriously injured." Samuel looked from his daughter's resolute expression to Ben's steady gaze and back again. Some of the anger seemed to drain out of him, replaced by weary acceptance. "Get in the wagon," he said finally. "Both of you, we'll talk about this when we get home." The ride back to town was tense and silent. Ben sat in the back with the horses they'd rescued from the logging trail, leaving Olivia up front with her father. As they entered Bonanza, Ben could see people watching from doorways and windows, curious about the drama unfolding. News traveled fast in small towns, and by morning everyone would know about their misadventure. When they reached the store, Samuel helped Olivia down from the wagon, then turned to Ben. "Take care of the horses, then come inside. We need to talk." Ben nodded, accepting the inevitable confrontation. He took his time stabling the horses, giving Samuel a chance to check on Olivia privately and perhaps cool his temper. By the time Ben entered the store, night had fallen completely, and Samuel was waiting for him with a grim expression. "Olivia's upstairs resting," Samuel said without preamble. "She insists you're not to blame for what happened today." "I should have been more careful," Ben admitted. "The logging trail was steeper than I expected." Samuel studied him for a long moment. "My daughter seems to trust you, Drake." "That's not something she does easily with strangers. She's a remarkable young woman," Ben said honestly. "You've raised her well." "Yes, she is," Samuel agreed, a hint of pride breaking through his stern demeanor. "And she's all I have in this world." He paused, then continued in a lower voice. "I know what you're running from, Drake." Ben stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "Sheriff Wilson showed me the telegram from Denver," Samuel explained, "about Judge Patterson's murder. About the bounty hunter named Benjamin Drake, who disappeared after a young woman was killed in the crossfire." The blood drained from Ben's face. He had been so careful, so certain that he had covered his tracks. "Mr. Sullivan," Samuel raised a hand to stop him. "I don't know the whole story, and right now I don't want to. What I do know is that for the past week you've worked hard, treated my daughter with respect, and by her account, saved her life today. That counts for something." Ben stood very still, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You can keep your job," Samuel continued, "but there will be no more outings alone with my daughter, and if I get even a hint that you're bringing trouble to my family or this town, I'll have the sheriff on you before you can blink. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Ben replied solemnly. "Thank you." Samuel nodded once, then headed for the stairs. "Lock up when you leave." Left alone in the darkened store, Ben released a shaky breath. His past was catching up to him faster than he had anticipated. Soon he would have to face the truth, all of it, and accept the consequences. But for tonight, at least, he still had a job and a place in Bonanza, tenuous though it might be. As he turned to leave, a soft voice called from the top of the stairs. "Mr. Drake, is that you?" Ben looked up to see Olivia standing there in a simple nightdress covered by a robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. Even in the dim light, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. Yes, Miss Sullivan, he replied quietly. Your father asked me to lock up. Olivia descended the stairs carefully, one hand trailing along the wall. I wanted to thank you again for today. I've never felt so alive, even with the accident, Ben asked, unable to keep a small smile from his voice. Even then, she confirmed, reaching the bottom of the stairs. Especially then. For once, someone treated me as a capable person, not a fragile thing to be protected. Ben swallowed hard. You are capable, Miss Sullivan, more than most. She moved closer, her steps sure in the familiar space. My father told you about the telegram, didn't he? I heard raised voices. Yes, Ben admitted, seeing no point in lying to her. Olivia stopped just a few feet away from him, her expression thoughtful. Whatever happened in your past, Mr. Drake, I believe there's goodness in you. I can hear it in your voice, feel it in the way you've treated me and others in this town. You can't know that, Ben protested gently. You don't know what I've done. I know what you do now, she replied simply, and sometimes that's enough to start with. Before Ben could respond, she stepped forward and, with unerring accuracy, placed a soft kiss on his cheek. Good night, Mr. Drake. Then she was gone, ascending the stairs with the same careful grace, leaving Ben standing in the darkened store with his hand touching the spot where her lips had been, wondering how this blind young woman could see so clearly what he had spent years trying to hide, even from himself. The following days brought an uneasy routine. Ben continued his work at the store, but Samuel kept him busy with tasks that limited his interaction with Olivia, sending him on solo deliveries, assigning him to reorganize the storeroom, or having him build new shelving in the back of the store. Despite these efforts, Ben and Olivia found brief moments to talk, usually during the quiet early mornings before Samuel came downstairs, or in the evenings as Ben was closing up. A week after the wagon accident, Theodore Hargrove returned to the store, this time with a formality that immediately put Samuel on alert. The mine owner wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a thin, ferret-faced man in an expensive suit whom he introduced as Mr. Parsons, his lawyer from Denver. Sullivan, Hargrove began, removing his hat with exaggerated politeness, I've come to make you one final offer for this property, double what I proposed before, cash in hand. He placed a document on the counter. Mr. Parsons has drawn up all the necessary papers. Samuel barely glanced at the offer. As I've told you repeatedly, Hargrove, the store is not for sale, not at any price. Hargrove's facade of politeness slipped, revealing the steel beneath. Don't be a fool, Sullivan. The railroad is coming through next year. Bonanza will grow, and this location will be prime real estate for my new bank. You're standing in the way of progress. My father said no, Mr. Hargrove, Olivia said firmly from where she stood arranging a display of fabrics. This store has been in our family for 15 years. It's our home. Hargrove's cold eyes shifted to Olivia, then to Ben, who had moved to stand protectively near her. Ah, the loyal employee. Still here, I see, Mr. Drake. He smiled thinly. Or should I say, the former bounty hunter. Your reputation precedes you. Ben kept his expression neutral, though his jaw tightened. I work for Mr. Sullivan now. That's all that matters. Is it? Hargrove mused. I wonder if the good people of Bonanza would agree, especially if they knew about that unfortunate business in Denver. Judge Patterson was well respected, you know. Are you threatening me, Hargrove? Ben asked quietly. Not at all, the mine owner replied smoothly. Simply making conversation. He turned back to Samuel. Think carefully about my offer, Sullivan. You have until the end of the week to reconsider. After Hargrove and his lawyer left, a heavy silence fell over the store. Olivia made her way to Ben's side, her hand finding his arm. What was he talking about? What happened in Denver? Samuel sighed heavily. Leave it be, Livy. No, she said firmly. I'm tired of being protected from the truth. If Mr. Hargrove is threatening Mr. Drake, I want to know why. Ben looked at Samuel, a silent question passing between them. After a moment, Samuel nodded reluctantly. She deserves to know, especially if Hargrove is going to use this against us. Taking a deep breath, Ben gently led Olivia to a chair behind the counter. 2 years ago, I was hired to bring in a man named James Carter. He'd robbed 3 banks and killed 2 people in the process. I tracked him to Denver and cornered him in the courthouse, where he was hiding, disguised as a clerk. Ben paused, the memories washing over him like a physical pain. I didn't know he had an accomplice. When I confronted Carter, his partner opened fire from behind me. In the chaos, Judge Patterson was killed along with a young woman who worked as his secretary. The newspapers said I shot them, that I was reckless and trigger-happy. "Did you?" Olivia asked softly. "No," Ben said, his voice thick with emotion, "but it was my fault they died. I should have been more careful, should have realized Carter wasn't working alone. After the shooting, I turned Carter over to the authorities, but his partner escaped. The evidence showed that neither of the victims was killed by my gun, but by then, public opinion had already condemned me. I left Denver that night and never went back. Until now," Samuel said, filling in the blank. "Bonanza is the first place you've stayed for more than a few days since then, isn't it?" Ben nodded. "Yes, I've been drifting, taking odd jobs, trying to outrun the memories. And trying to find Carter's partner. I have reason to believe he came to this area. And that's why Hargrove recognized your name," Olivia realized. "The story must have been in the Denver newspapers. He's using it to pressure your father to sell," Ben confirmed grimly. "If he turns the town against me, against your family for employing me." "We've weathered worse," Samuel declared, though his expression was troubled. "Hargrove can spread whatever rumors he likes. Those who matter know us, trust us." Olivia reached out, finding Ben's hand and squeezing it gently. "And now we know you too, Mr. Drake. Thank you for telling us the truth." Her touch, her unflinching acceptance after hearing his darkest secret, undid something in Ben. For the first time in 2 years, he felt a weight lifting, not completely gone, but lighter, more bearable. "Thank you for listening," he replied softly, "and for not judging me as others have." The bell above the door jangled as customers entered, ending their private conversation, but something fundamental had changed. Ben had shared his secret, and instead of rejection, he had found understanding. It wasn't absolution, he still carried the guilt of those deaths, but it was a beginning. That evening, after the store closed, Samuel surprised both Ben and Olivia by inviting Ben to join them for supper upstairs in their living quarters. It was a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread, but the gesture of inclusion was significant. As they ate, the conversation remained carefully neutral, focusing on store business and town gossip, but the underlying tension had eased considerably. After the meal, Samuel excused himself to go over the ledgers, leaving Ben and Olivia alone in the small sitting room adjacent to the kitchen. Olivia moved to the piano in the corner, her fingers finding the keys with practiced ease. "Do you play, Mr. Drake?" she asked, patting the bench beside her in invitation. Ben sat down, careful to leave a respectable distance between them. "No, I never had the opportunity to learn. My father was a cattle drover. We moved around too much for such luxuries." Olivia nodded in understanding. "My mother taught me. It was one of the few things that came easily to me as a child." She began to play a gentle, melancholy tune that filled the small room with warmth. "Music makes sense to me in a way many things don't. It has structure, pattern, but also emotion and life." Ben watched her hands move confidently across the keys, marveling at her skill. "It's beautiful." Olivia smiled, pleased by the genuine appreciation in his voice. "Thank you." She hesitated, then asked, "May I? Would you mind if I touched your face? It helps me to know what people look like." The request caught Ben off guard, but he found himself nodding before he remembered she couldn't see the gesture. "Yes, of course," he said, his voice slightly rough. Olivia's hands left the piano keys and hovered uncertainly in the air between them. Ben gently took her wrists and guided her hands to his face. Her touch was light, almost reverent, as her fingertips traced the lines of his forehead, the arch of his eyebrows, the slope of his nose. She explored the contours of his cheekbones, the slight hollow beneath them, the stubble along his jaw. When her thumb brushed across his lips, Ben had to suppress a shiver. "You have kind eyes," she said softly, her hands still framing his face. Ben smiled despite himself. "How can you tell?" "The skin around them," she explained. "It's softer with small creases at the corners. You smile with your eyes, not just your mouth." Her hands dropped reluctantly back to her lap. "Thank you for indulging me." "Thank you for seeing me," Ben replied, the words carrying a deeper meaning than the obvious. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Finally, Ben stood, knowing he should leave before he said or did something that couldn't be undone. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "It's getting late." Olivia nodded, rising from the piano bench. "Will you be all right if Hargrove starts spreading rumors about you, I mean?" "I've faced worse," Ben assured her, though the concern in her voice warmed him. "Don't worry about me." "I can't help it," she admitted with a small smile. "It's what friends do, friends." The word was both a comfort and a disappointment. Ben knew he should be grateful for that much, given his past and the complications of the present. Yet as he bid her good night and descended the stairs to leave the store, he couldn't deny that his feelings for Olivia Sullivan had grown into something far more profound than friendship. The next morning, Ben arrived at the store to find Sheriff Wilson waiting for him, his expression grave. "Drake," the sheriff said with a curt nod. "Need a word?" Ben followed Wilson to a quiet spot near the livery stable, away from curious ears. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" "Hargrove came to see me yesterday," Wilson began without preamble. "Showed me some newspaper clippings from Denver about Judge Patterson's murder." Ben's face hardened. "I didn't kill the judge, I know," Wilson surprised him by saying. "I sent telegrams to the Denver authorities after our last conversation. Got the full report back yesterday morning. You were cleared of wrongdoing in the actual shooting, though there were questions about your methods." "Then why are we having this conversation?" Ben asked cautiously. The sheriff sighed, looking suddenly tired. "Because Hargrove's stirring up trouble. He's convinced half the town that we're harboring a dangerous killer. People are scared, Drake, and scared people do stupid things." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you might want to consider moving on," Wilson said bluntly. "For your own safety and for the Sullivans. Hargrove has a lot of influence in Bonanza. He employs most of the men in town at his mine or his other businesses. If he turns them against you, against the Sullivans for employing you—" "I won't run again," Ben said firmly. "I've been running for 2 years. It's time to stand my ground." Wilson studied him for a long moment. "This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain storekeeper's daughter, would it?" Ben didn't answer directly. "The Sullivans have been good to me. I won't abandon them to Hargrove's pressure tactics." "Fair enough," the sheriff conceded. "But be careful, Drake. Hargrove doesn't take kindly to being thwarted, and there's something else you should know." He lowered his voice. "One of the miners mentioned seeing a stranger in town yesterday, asking questions about you. Described him as tall, thin, with a scar across his right cheek." Ben's blood ran cold. The description matched what he knew of Carter's accomplice, the man he had been tracking for 2 years. "Did he give a name?" "Called himself Smith," Wilson replied with a grimace. "Original, huh? Nobody knows where he's staying, but he was last seen heading toward Hargrove's office." "Thank you for the warning," Ben said, his mind racing with the implications. If Carter's partner was in Bonanza, and if he was working with Hargrove, the situation was more dangerous than he had imagined. "Just doing my job," Wilson replied. "And Drake. Despite what Hargrove might think, that job includes protecting everyone in Bonanza, even former bounty hunters." With that unexpected show of support, the sheriff departed, leaving Ben with much to consider. The morning stretched into afternoon as Ben worked mechanically at his tasks, his thoughts preoccupied with the looming threats. Samuel noticed his distraction, but said nothing, merely assigning him less complicated tasks that required minimal concentration. It was Olivia who finally confronted him, cornering him in the storeroom when Samuel was busy with customers. "Something's wrong," she stated, not bothering with preliminaries. "You've barely said 10 words all day, and you've been pacing when you think no one is watching." Ben sighed, knowing he couldn't hide anything from her perceptiveness. "Sheriff Wilson spoke to me this morning. Hargrove's been talking about my past, turning people against me. And there's more. A man matching the description of Carter's partner was seen in town yesterday, meeting with Hargrove." Olivia's face paled. "The man who actually killed Judge Patterson and the secretary?" "I believe so," Ben confirmed grimly. "I've been tracking him for 2 years, hoping to clear my name completely, and now he's here, possibly working with Hargrove. What does Hargrove gain by allying with a killer?" Olivia wondered, her brow furrowed in concern. I'm not sure, Ben admitted. But the timing is suspicious. Hargrove wants your father's store, and suddenly my past is being used against me, against your family. And a man who has every reason to want me dead appears in town. Olivia reached out, her hand finding his arm with unerring accuracy. You're not alone in this, Benjamin, she said, using his full name for the first time. My father and I stand with you. The simple declaration, spoken with such certainty, filled Ben with both gratitude and fear. That's what worries me, he confessed. I've put you both in danger by staying here. We were already in Hargrove's sights, Olivia reminded him. He's wanted our store for months. You're just a convenient weapon for him to use. Before Ben could respond, they heard Samuel calling for Olivia. She squeezed Ben's arm once more, then turned to leave. We'll talk more later, she promised in a whisper. Don't do anything rash. The remainder of the day passed without incident, though Ben remained vigilant, watching every customer who entered the store with careful scrutiny. By closing time, his nerves were frayed from the constant tension. As he was sweeping the front porch, preparing to lock up for the night, he spotted a familiar figure approaching from the direction of the hotel. Sheriff Wilson, moving with urgent purpose. Drake, Wilson called as he neared. There's been trouble at the mine. Explosion in one of the tunnels. Samuel's needed one of the injured men is his cousin Joe. Ben immediately set aside the broom. I'll get him. Within minutes, Samuel was hitching up his wagon, his face tight with worry. Joe's worked that mine for 10 years. He knows every tunnel like the back of his hand. This wasn't an accident. You think Hargrove arranged it? Ben asked in a low voice, mindful of Olivia standing nearby. I wouldn't put it past him, Samuel replied grimly. Especially if Joe refused to go along with whatever scheme he's cooking up. I'll come with you, Ben offered. Samuel shook his head. No, I need you to stay here with Olivia. If this is Hargrove making his move, the store might be a target too. Ben nodded in understanding. We'll be fine. Be careful, Samuel. As Samuel drove away with the sheriff, Ben turned to find Olivia standing in the doorway of the store, her expression troubled. Come inside, he urged gently. Let me lock up. Once inside, Ben secured all the doors and windows, drawing the blinds and lighting only a single lamp in the back of the store. We should go upstairs, he suggested. It's more defensible if there's trouble. Olivia nodded, allowing him to guide her up the familiar stairs to the living quarters above. In the small sitting room, she sank onto the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Do you really think Hargrove would hurt someone to get what he wants? Ben sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance despite his instinct to pull her close. I think a man who allies himself with killers is capable of anything. They sat in tense silence for several minutes, listening to the normal evening sounds of Bonanza gradually quieting as businesses closed and people returned to their homes. The distant church bell tolled 8 o'clock, its mellow tones muffled by the closed windows. Benjamin, Olivia said suddenly, breaking the silence, if something happens, nothing will happen, he interrupted firmly. I won't let it. She smiled faintly at his protectiveness. Let me finish. If something happens, I want you to know that these past weeks since you came to Bonanza have been the happiest of my life. Ben's heart constricted painfully in his chest. Olivia, please, she continued, her voice soft but determined. Let me say this. All my life, people have defined me by what I lack my sight. They see me as helpless, limited, an object of pity, but not you. From the beginning, you've treated me as a whole person, capable and worthy of respect. You've described the world to me in ways that make it more vivid than I ever imagined. You've made me feel alive, Benjamin. She reached out, her hand finding his with surprising accuracy in the dim light. I know there are complications, my father's concerns, your past, Hargrove's threats, but I also know what I feel and I'm not afraid of it. Ben stared at their joined hands, overwhelmed by her courage and the depth of feeling in her words. You should be afraid, he said hoarsely. I've brought nothing but trouble to your door. That's not true, Olivia insisted, squeezing his hand. You've brought laughter and conversation and a perspective I'd never have known otherwise. You've brought yourself, Benjamin Drake, and that's more valuable than you realize. Unable to resist any longer, Ben raised his free hand to cup her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as a soft sigh escaped her lips. "Olivia," he whispered, "you see more clearly than anyone I've ever known." The sound of breaking glass downstairs shattered the moment. Ben was on his feet instantly, drawing the pistol he carried concealed under his vest. "Stay here," he ordered in a whisper. "Lock the door behind me." "No," Olivia protested, rising as well. "I won't hide while you face danger alone." "Olivia, please." Another crash from below cut off his plea. Ben knew there was no time to argue. "Stay behind me," he conceded. "And if I tell you to run, you run. No questions." Moving silently to the top of the stairs, Ben listened intently. He could hear at least two men moving through the store, not bothering to be quiet, either confident that the building was empty or wanting to be heard. "Check upstairs," a rough voice commanded. "Hargrove says the girl's probably up there. Grab her, and Drake will follow." Ben's blood ran cold at the casual brutality in the man's voice. He retreated quickly to Olivia, who had heard everything with her acute hearing. "The window in my father's room," she whispered. "It leads to the roof of the storeroom. We can get out that way." Guiding her through the darkened living quarters to Samuel's bedroom, Ben helped Olivia through the window onto the flat roof of the storeroom addition at the back of the building. They had just made it outside when they heard the intruders kicking in the door to the living quarters. "This way," Olivia murmured, moving with surprising confidence across the roof. "There's a ladder on the far side that Pa uses for repairs." They reached the ladder just as angry voices confirmed their escape. Ben helped Olivia onto the ladder, then followed quickly. As they reached the ground, a shot rang out, splintering wood near Ben's head. "Run," he urged, pulling Olivia toward the cover of nearby buildings. They fled through the darkened alleys of Bonanza, Ben leading Olivia as quickly as she could safely move. Behind them, he could hear their pursuers shouting to each other, spreading out to cut off escape routes. The town was small, with limited places to hide, and Ben knew they couldn't simply outrun the danger. "The church," Olivia suggested breathlessly as they paused in a shadowy doorway. "Reverend Miller keeps a key under the back step. No one will look for us there." Ben hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Lead the way." Olivia moved confidently through the familiar streets, her hand in Ben's as she guided them toward the small white church at the edge of town. True to her word, they found the key exactly where she had described, and minutes later were safely inside the silent building. The church was cool and dark, smelling of beeswax candles and old hymnals. Ben led Olivia to a pew near the altar, where they were hidden from view of the windows. As they sat close together in the darkness, Ben could feel Olivia trembling slightly from exertion or fear. He wasn't sure. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his arm around her shoulders. "Yes," she replied, her voice steadier than he expected. "What about you? I heard a shot." "Missed me," Ben assured her. "We're safe for now, but we need a plan. Those men won't give up easily." Olivia nodded, her thinking practical despite their dire circumstances. "The church bell," she said suddenly. "It's loud enough to wake the whole town. If we ring it, people will come running, including the sheriff if he's back from the mine." "It's risky," Ben cautioned. "We'd have to expose ourselves to reach the bell tower." "Do we have a choice?" Olivia asked simply. "We can't hide here forever." Before Ben could answer, the church door creaked open. He pulled Olivia down behind the pew, one hand covering her mouth gently to stifle any sound. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoed on the wooden floor of the church. "I know you're in here, Drake," called a voice that sent ice through Ben's veins. It was a voice he had heard only once before, on that fateful day in the Denver courthouse. "Hargrove said you might come this way. The blind girl knows the town too well for her own good." Ben felt Olivia stiffen beside him at the casual cruelty in the man's tone. He removed his hand from her mouth, squeezing her shoulder in silent reassurance before drawing his pistol once more. "You've been looking for me for 2 years, the voice continued, moving closer to their hiding place. "Did you think I didn't know, that I wasn't watching you too? You're predictable, Drake, always trying to do the right thing to make amends. That's why I knew you'd eventually come to Bonanza." "How?" Ben whispered to himself, confused by the man's words. As if hearing the unspoken question, the intruder laughed softly. "You really don't know, do you?" Check the girl's locket sometime, the one with her mother's picture. Ask her where it came from. Ben glanced at Olivia in the darkness, seeing her hand go instinctively to the silver locket she always wore around her neck. Her expression was a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "Enough games," Ben called out, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. "You killed Judge Patterson and his secretary. You let me take the blame. Why show yourself now?" "Because Hargrove made me a better offer than staying hidden," the man replied, his footsteps stopping just on the other side of the pew where they hid. "The mine, the coming railroad, the bank he plans to build, there's a fortune to be made in Bonanza. All he needs is to remove a few obstacles." In one fluid motion, Ben stood and leveled his pistol at the intruder. "Don't move, Carter." The man, unmistakably James Carter, despite the new scar across his right cheek, smiled coldly. "It's not Carter anymore. It's Smith now, and you're in no position to give orders, Drake." From the shadows at the back of the church, two more men emerged, both holding revolvers aimed at Ben. Carter, or Smith as he now called himself, gestured casually toward Olivia. "The girl comes with us. Hargrove has plans for persuading her father to sell. Over my dead body," Ben growled. Smith's smile widened. "That can be arranged. In fact, it's part of the plan. The dangerous bounty hunter killed while kidnapping the blind girl. Very tragic." Olivia rose to her feet beside Ben, her face calm despite the danger. "You won't get away with this," she said with quiet certainty. "My father won't sell, no matter what you do to me." "We'll see," Smith replied dismissively. "People can be surprisingly flexible when their loved ones are suffering." He nodded to his men. "Take them." As the two gunmen advanced, a thunderous boom shook the church, the massive bell in the tower above, ringing out across the sleeping town. Everyone froze for an instant, looking up in confusion. Then the church door burst open, and Samuel Sullivan stood framed in the entrance, a shotgun in his hands. "Get away from my daughter," he commanded, his voice hard as steel. In the chaos that followed, several things happened at once. Smith's men turned their guns toward the new threat. Ben pushed Olivia down behind the pew and fired at the closest gunman. Samuel's shotgun roared, the blast catching the second man squarely in the chest. And from somewhere in the balcony above, the bell continued to ring, calling the townspeople to arms. Smith, seeing his advantage disappearing, turned to flee toward the back of the church. Ben vaulted over the pew and gave chase, unwilling to let the man escape again. They crashed through the vestry and out a side door into the night. In the churchyard, Smith turned suddenly, a knife gleaming in his hand. He slashed wildly at Ben, who dodged the first attack but wasn't quick enough to avoid the second. The blade cut across his ribs, not deep but painful enough to make him gasp. "You should have stayed away, Drake," Smith snarled, circling for another attack. "Everyone you care about dies, haven't you noticed? First your partner in Santa Fe, then the judge and his secretary, and now the blind girl and her father will join them." Ben's vision narrowed with cold fury. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "It ends here." When Smith lunged again, Ben was ready. He deflected the knife with his left arm, ignoring the pain as the blade sliced through his sleeve and drove his right fist into Smith's solar plexus. As the man doubled over, Ben brought his knee up hard, connecting with Smith's face with a sickening crunch. The knife fell to the ground as Smith collapsed, blood streaming from his broken nose. Ben picked up the fallen knife and stood over his defeated enemy, breathing hard. For 2 years he had imagined this moment, had dreamed of exacting justice for the innocent lives this man had taken. His hand tightened on the knife handle. "Benjamin, don't." Olivia's voice, soft but clear in the night air, pulled him back from the brink. He turned to see her standing in the church doorway, her father's hand on her shoulder. "He's not worth your soul," she continued, taking a careful step toward him. "Let the law handle him now." Ben looked down at the semi-conscious Smith, then back at Olivia's face, illuminated by the light spilling from the church. In her expression, he saw not pity or fear, but understanding and a deep, abiding faith in him that he had done nothing to deserve. Slowly, deliberately, he dropped the knife. "You're right," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "As always." By then, Sheriff Wilson and several townsmen had arrived, drawn by the church bell. As they took Smith into custody, Ben made his way to Olivia's side, wincing slightly from his wounds. "You're hurt," she said immediately, her hand finding the wet patch on his shirt with unerring accuracy. "It's nothing serious," he assured her, though he allowed her father to help him back into the church and onto a pew while they waited for the doctor. As the initial chaos subsided, Ben remembered Smith's cryptic words about Olivia's locket. "Olivia," he began hesitantly, "Smith said something about your locket, about your mother's picture." Olivia's hand went to the silver oval hanging around her neck. "This. It was a gift from my mother's brother. He sent it after she died." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't understand what it has to do with anything." Samuel, who had been speaking with the sheriff nearby, turned sharply at her words. "Your uncle sent that." "Olivia, your mother didn't have a brother. She was an only child." "But the letter that came with it," Olivia protested, clearly bewildered. "It was signed Uncle James. You read it to me yourself, Pa." A cold dread settled in Ben's stomach. "James Carter," he said softly, "Smith's real name." Samuel's face paled. "Let me see that locket, Livy." With trembling fingers, Olivia removed the locket and handed it to her father. Samuel opened it carefully, revealing the small portrait inside a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Olivia. "This is your mother," he confirmed, his voice strained. "But why would Carter send this? How would he even have her picture?" Sheriff Wilson joined them, his expression grim. "Smith or Carter has been talking, says he's been watching Drake for 2 years ever since Denver. Followed him from town to town, but he also mentioned something else that might explain this." He gestured to the locket. "He was in Bonanza once before, about 10 years ago, working the mine under a different name." 10 years ago, Samuel repeated slowly. "That would have been when," he broke off, his face ashen. "When what, Pa?" Olivia asked, reaching for her father's hand. Samuel sank onto the pew beside her, suddenly looking every one of his 55 years. "When your mother and I were having troubles, Livy, we separated for a few months. She found comfort elsewhere, though she came back to me before you were born. We never spoke of that time again." Olivia sat very still as the implications of her father's words sank in. "Are you saying that James Carter is—" "I don't know," Samuel interrupted quickly. "Your mother never told me who it was, but the timing, and now this locket." Ben watched the pain and confusion on Olivia's face, wishing he could shield her from this additional shock. "It doesn't matter," he said firmly. "Carter is a killer and a liar. Even if there is some connection, it changes nothing about who you are, Olivia." She turned toward his voice, her unseeing eyes filled with unshed tears. "But if if we're related by blood." "Blood isn't what makes a family," Ben insisted, taking her hand in his. "Your father raised you, loved you, protected you. That's what matters." Samuel nodded gratefully at Ben's words. "He's right, Livy. You're my daughter in every way that counts." He cleared his throat, clearly struggling with his emotions. "I should have told you about that time long ago. I wanted to protect your memory of your mother." "I understand, Pa," Olivia said softly, squeezing his hand. "But no more secrets, please. I'm stronger than you think." "Yes, you are," Samuel agreed, a hint of pride breaking through his distress. "Stronger than all of us, I suspect." The arrival of Dr. Matthews interrupted their conversation. As the doctor tended to Ben's wounds, Sheriff Wilson provided more details about the night's events. The explosion at the mine had indeed been a diversion, planned by Hargrove to draw Samuel away from the store. Joe Sullivan had suspected something was wrong and had tried to warn the other miners, which was why he had been injured but not killed in the blast. "Hargrove's been arrested," Wilson informed them. "Found him at his house, packing to leave town. With Smith's confession and the testimony of the surviving gunman, he'll be facing charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, and likely a dozen other crimes once we sort through his business dealings." "What about the store?" Samuel asked. "And the mine?" "The bank in Denver will probably take over Hargrove's assets temporarily," Wilson replied. "But your store is safe, Sullivan. No one will be forcing you to sell anytime soon." As dawn broke over Bonanza, casting golden light through the church's stained glass windows, the immediate danger had passed. Dr. Matthews had stitched Ben's wounds and declared him lucky neither cut was deep enough to cause serious damage. Samuel, exhausted but relieved, had gone to check on his cousin Joe at the doctor's house, leaving Ben and Olivia alone in a quiet corner of the church. "You should rest," Olivia said, her hand gentle on Ben's arm, careful to avoid his injuries. "It's been a long night." "So should you," he countered softly. "But I doubt either of us will sleep much today." Olivia smiled faintly. "Probably not." Her expression grew serious. "What happens now, Benjamin? With Carter or Smith in custody, your name will be cleared. You could go anywhere, do anything." The question hung between them, laden with unspoken hopes and fears. Ben looked at her face, at the strength and vulnerability mingled there, and knew with sudden certainty what he wanted. "I've been running for 2 years," he said, taking her hand in his. "Looking for justice, for redemption, for something to fill the emptiness inside me. I never expected to find it in Bonanza." "And have you," Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "found what you were looking for?" "I've found something better," Ben replied, his free hand gently touching her cheek. "I've found you, Olivia. Someone who sees me really sees me not for what I've done or failed to do, but for who I am." Olivia leaned into his touch, a single tear escaping to trail down her cheek. "And who are you, Benjamin Drake?" "A man who's made mistakes," he admitted honestly. "A man who's trying to be better. A man who," he took a deep breath, gathering his courage, "a man who loves you, Olivia Sullivan." The words, once spoken, seemed to fill the space between them with a tangible warmth. Olivia's face transformed, joy breaking through the weariness like sunshine through clouds. "I love you too," she said simply, her hand finding his face with unerring accuracy. "I think I have since that first day when you described the mountains to me as if you were painting them with words." Ben leaned forward slowly, giving her time to anticipate his movement, and kissed her with gentle reverence. It was a promise, a beginning, a homecoming all at once. When they parted, both were smiling despite the trials of the night. "I want to stay in Bonanza," Ben told her, his decision made. "If your father will still have me at the store, if the town will accept me now that the truth is known." "They will," Olivia said with quiet confidence. "And if they don't at first, they'll learn to. Just as I knew there was goodness in you from the beginning, they'll see it too in time." As the morning light strengthened, filling the church with color and warmth, Ben and Olivia sat together, hands entwined, looking toward a future neither had dared to imagine just days before. There would be challenges ahead: Samuel's adjustment to their relationship, the town's reaction to the full story of Ben's past, the legal proceedings against Hargrove and Carter, but for the first time in years, Ben faced the future with hope rather than dread. In the blind girl from a small mining town, he had found not only love but also the chance for redemption and belonging. And in the former bounty hunter with a troubled past, Olivia had found someone who saw her as complete, capable, and worthy of a love story all her own. 2 months later, on a perfect summer evening, Benjamin Drake stood nervously at the altar of the same church that had been a sanctuary during their darkest hour. The building was transformed, filled with flowers, candles, and nearly every resident of Bonanza. News of Carter's confession and Hargrove's crimes had spread quickly, and Ben's role in bringing both men to justice had turned public opinion decidedly in his favor. Samuel Sullivan stood at the back of the church, his daughter's arm linked with his. Olivia was radiant in a simple white dress, her auburn hair crowned with wildflowers. As the small ensemble began to play the wedding march, Samuel leaned close to his daughter's ear. "Are you ready, Livy?" he asked softly. Olivia smiled, her unseeing eyes bright with joy. "I've been ready since the moment I heard his voice, Pa. He's the one I've been waiting for." Samuel kissed her cheek gently. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become, and so am I." Together, they walked down the aisle toward Ben, who watched Olivia's approach with undisguised awe. When Samuel placed Olivia's hand in Ben's, there was no hesitation, no regret in the older man's movements, only blessing and acceptance. "Take care of each other," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's all I ask." "We will, Pa," Olivia promised. "With everything I am," Ben added solemnly. As they exchanged their vows before Reverend Miller and the assembled townspeople, Ben and Olivia stood as equals, each with their own strengths. each with their own scars, each choosing the other with clear-eyed certainty. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Miller declared, his weathered face creased in a broad smile. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and more food than the small town had seen in one place for years. Samuel surprised the newlyweds with a gift, the deed to a small parcel of land adjacent to the store, where they could build their own home while still remaining close enough for Olivia to help with the business she loved. As the evening waned, Ben led Olivia away from the festivities for a moment of quiet together. They stood on the church steps, where weeks earlier they had faced death and discovered truths that might have torn them apart, but instead had brought them closer. "Happy, Mrs. Drake?" Ben asked, his arm around her waist. Olivia's smile was answer enough, but she turned her face up to his, her expression radiant in the moonlight. "Happier than I ever thought possible. And you?" "I never knew happiness could feel like this," he admitted, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Like coming home after a journey I didn't even know I was on." "That's a beautiful way to put it," Olivia said. "You always find the perfect words to make me see." Ben chuckled softly. "Ironic, isn't it? You're the one who truly sees, Olivia. You saw goodness in me when I couldn't see it in myself. And now everyone sees it," she replied, nestling closer to him. "I told you they would." They remained there a while longer, listening to the sounds of celebration inside the church, feeling the gentle summer breeze, and sharing the comfortable silence of two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed: acceptance, understanding, and a love that transcended the visible world to touch something deeper and more lasting. 5 years later, the sound of childish laughter filled the garden behind the Drake home as 4-year-old Samuel chased his 2-year-old sister Eliza through rows of fragrant herbs and vegetables. From the porch, Olivia listened to their play with a smile, her hands busy with knitting while her foot gently rocked the cradle containing their newest addition, 1-month-old baby James. "Careful with your sister, Samuel," she called as the boy's footsteps grew more exuberant. "Remember, she's smaller than you." "Yes, Mama," came the dutiful reply, followed by more giggles from Eliza. Olivia's smile widened as she heard the familiar sound of hoofbeats approaching from the direction of town. Even after 5 years of marriage, her heart still quickened at Ben's return home each evening. The store had prospered under their joint management, with Samuel gradually stepping back to enjoy a semi-retirement that included ample time with his grandchildren. Ben's voice carried from the front of the house as he greeted the children, followed by excited squeals as they abandoned their game to rush to their father. Moments later, he appeared on the porch, a child in each arm, his face alight with the joy that had become his natural expression over the years. "How are my favorite people in the world?" he asked, setting the children down to lean over and kiss Olivia tenderly. "We're well," she replied, her hand finding his cheek in a gesture that had become habitual between them. "And you, how was the trip to Denver?" Ben had made quarterly trips to the city since their marriage, initially to testify in the trials of Hargrove and Carter, and later to conduct business for the expanding store. This latest journey had been to finalize arrangements with suppliers for the new branch of Sullivan and Drake General Store that would open in the growing town of Silverton, 30 miles south. "Successful," Ben reported, pulling up a chair beside her. "The contracts are signed and the first shipments will arrive in Silverton next month. Your father's already talking about who should manage the new store." "Let me guess," Olivia laughed. "He wants to do it himself." "Got it in one," Ben confirmed, chuckling. "I told him he's supposed to be retiring, not taking on new ventures at 60. "Good luck with that argument," Olivia said, reaching into the cradle to check on the sleeping baby. "You know how he is once he gets an idea in his head." Ben watched her with their children, marveling as he often did at the easy grace with which she navigated motherhood despite her blindness. She had developed systems for everything, from color-coding the children's clothes with different textured buttons to creating paths in their home that the children learned never to block. Her confidence and capability had only grown with each child, as had Ben's admiration for her. "I ran into Sheriff Wilson in town," Ben said after a moment. "He had news from the territorial prison." Olivia's hands stilled on her knitting. "Oh, Hargrove died last week," Ben said quietly, mindful of the children playing nearby. "Natural causes, apparently. And Carter Smith is being transferred to a federal prison back east. Neither of them will threaten Bonanza again." Olivia nodded, absorbing the news. "I'm not sure how to feel about that," she admitted. "After everything they did." "I know," Ben said, taking her hand. "But it's over now, truly over. We can move forward without looking back." "We've been doing that for years," Olivia pointed out with a small smile. "Ever since that first day you rode into town and changed everything." "You changed everything," Ben corrected her gently. "You saw something in me worth saving when I didn't see it myself. And you showed me a world beyond my father's protection," Olivia countered. "We saved each other, I think." The baby in the cradle stirred and began to fuss. Ben lifted him carefully, cradling his son against his chest with the practiced ease of an experienced father. There, little man," he murmured. "Papa's got you." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors that Ben would later describe to Olivia in his poetic way, the Drake family gathered on their porch, secure in the love they had built together. Samuel and Eliza climbed into their mother's lap, while Ben sat close beside her, baby James now sleeping peacefully in his arms. "Tell us a story, Papa," Samuel requested, his dark eyes so like his father's wide with anticipation. "What kind of story would you like?" Ben asked, though he already knew the answer. It was the children's favorite tale. "The one about Mama and how she could see things no one else could see," Eliza piped up, snuggling closer to Olivia. Ben's eyes met Olivia's over the children's heads, and the look that passed between them held all the love and understanding of their journey together. "Well," he began, his voice taking on the storyteller's cadence that enthralled his children and still, after all these years, made Olivia's heart swell with love. "Once upon a time, there was a very special young woman who was blind from birth but could see the goodness in people's hearts better than anyone else in the world." As the story unfolded their story, with the difficult parts softened for young ears, Olivia listened to the deep, gentle voice of the man she loved, surrounded by the family they had created together. In the softening light of evening, in the town that had become their home, they had found a happiness that neither had dared to dream of before that fateful day when a dusty, troubled bounty hunter rode into Bonanza and met a blind girl who saw him more clearly than anyone ever had. And in that seeing, in that recognition of the goodness beneath the scars, they had both found healing, purpose, and a love that would continue to guide them through whatever adventures still lay ahead.